Hey everybody, welcome to the Manifold channel. Today we're going to take a look at the new wonderful style capabilities that enable us to format areas. And we're looking at Manifold right now. Everything, by the way, that we're about to do works in Manifold Viewer as well. So we're looking at a Manifold work session, and we have a map open, and the map has layers for labels for Australia, and then if you turn that off, a background layer that's also a copy of Australia, but instead of Australian provinces, this is just all Australia in one deal. So let's take a look at this. We've got areas thematically formatted with fill color by the name of the area. The field we're using is the name of the area. So the different names of the various provinces here in Australia are colored differently by their names. We've put the labels off to the side so they won't interfere with how we will be drawing the areas. If you want to change those layers back to default color, we can do that in a heartbeat like that. Or if we like, we can do the thematic format again by picking a field, name, and using a some sort of interval combination like unique values. Click tally, and choose a palette. Let's choose the pastel palette. Click update style, and there we've thematically formatted the areas. Great. So now let's change the symbology for the areas. Let's actually change how these areas can look. To do that, we can do that for each area individually, one at a time, by clicking on it and then pulling up the main style dialog. I have to do that out of sight of the video because it's off the screen, where the way the menu opens up. Or if we like, we can do that using the symbol button here. Just change the symbology and not change any of the colors. So let's take a look at what we can do for areas. We're seeing a preview of what the area looks like here with the background color automatically filled into the preview pane. We can choose a symbology pattern. That's any one of these. And we can change the thickness of the stroke to something like 0.5 to make it thinner. Click OK, and we've applied that. The other buttons will automatically apply to that. So for example, if we want to change the rotation, we can change that to 15 or to 30 or whatever we want it to be. If we like, we can thematically format based on rotation. So we're clicking this rotation button. We can choose a field. Let's make it also name. And let's change this, so let's start with 0, and we'll have the endpoint be 90, and I'll do a little trick here. I'll control Alt to select all of them, then right click and choose interpolate, and it'll automatically interpolate the numbers for me for the different rotations. Click update style, and the various rotations here will apply thematically formatted. Let's reset that back to 0, and back here let's go back to using a solid fill color. Let's take a look at what the other, and click OK, and there it's done. Let's see what these other tabs do. The various capabilities, because there's so many of them, are split up into tabs. There's the border tab, which controls the border. So for example, we can change the border of the area to a thickness of 3 or 4, or a percentage value like 30% of the whatever is the size figure. I'll just make it let's say 2 for now. Or we can make it some sort of repeating symbol, like that, or that, or that, or that, or that, or that. Let's just leave it a standard line. The inner, and if we like, we can format this with dashes and dots. So we can do like 5, 5 to make that a dashed line. Click OK, and we've just formatted the borders for the areas as these dashes. If we like, we can put a halo into there, into that border, to make it white, to fill in the spots in between the dashes, and that gives us that kind of dashed effect. We don't have to use black, of course. I just use black because it's for the border, because that's just something convenient. We can, if we like, use something like this color and make the halo color black. Or no, let's make it like that color. Very dramatic. There we go. If we don't want to use the border, we just uncheck the border. So what are these other? Well, no, let's use the border, but let's just make it a plain black, and let's make it a 0.5. Now let's make it 0.8 thick line, and we won't make it dash dot. We'll just delete the dash dot specification, and we won't use the halo. So that I'll just make it a plain line in 0.8 color. There. What do the other settings do? The other tabs do? We've seen what symbol does. It just picks one of these. we've seen what border does. It just puts the border on and off. The inner fills in a swath of the area to whatever the setting is here for the inner outer offsets. Let's make those. Let's make that 6 so we can see it a little bit better. And then here in the inner, I'll pick this pattern right there, or that pattern, or that pattern. Let's pick that pattern, and I'll make the stroke very fine. Make it 0.2. You can see how that's made the colors are thinner, the lines thinner. And let's make the fineness of the pattern not 100%, but 40%. So now when I click that on, you'll see that to the extent that we've set for the offset from the inner to the inside of the area, we've now filled that with that pattern. That pattern ends up looking fairly fine because the lines that we've used for the inner is a stroke of 0.2, so that's 0.2 of a point thickness of the lines. They're so thin that they end up looking gray, even though the color that we're using for the stroke is black. And the fineness of the pattern is 40% of whatever the size value is here. So if this is 8 points, it's 40% of that. And you can see how this works. So if we make the size, say, 12, that pattern gets bigger looking because it's 40% of 12 or 40% of 40. Let's go back to the default 8. So that gives that kind of a fine little inner kind of etching to the area that gives us some definition. The inner border allows us to draw another border line to the inside of whatever is this pattern that we've drawn. So let's make that not too dramatic. Let's make it a fairly thin line. Let's make it a 0.2 line. And let's make it a dash dot line. So let's make it a dash of 5 followed by a space of 10. And we'll click OK. And you can see that provides a kind of a fine little line in the middle. We don't have to have the inner effect for that. If we like, we can turn the inner effect off and just leave that inner border. So here's the inner. Let's take the inner effect and turn it off. And that just leaves that inner kind of dotted line. So what's outer all about? If we do outer on these areas here, let's choose outer right there, and let's make that a 40% pattern. And we'll use this pattern right there. And the stroke is going to be 0.2. You'll see that it ends up looking ugly because the outer parts of these areas will overlap on each other. So outer is not a particularly good effect to use when areas are adjacent because the outer will interfere with each other. So let's turn that off. And if we want to put something, let's remove that. If we want to put an outer effect around all of Australia, that's what we have the second layer for, which doesn't have any inner lines. It's just all of Australia. So I'm going to click on that, and now anything that we apply in the style panel is going to apply only to this layer, the All Australia layer. So one of the things we can do is we can manipulate the thickness of the border of this All Australia, and the border is 1.5. Let's make it 2. So let's make it thicker. You can see how that gives more definition to Australia because the thickness of this line here shows up around the outside of the Australia continent. That allows us to give the effect of having the border dividing lines between the areas inside of Australia kind of thinner, while the outer one for Australia is kind of thick. Okay, let's click back on All Australia, and now let's use an outer effect on this. And the outer effect that I want to do is I just want to fill it in with plain color. And I want to fill it into an offset of, let's make that 8 points. So let's make that kind of bigger. So what color do I want to make that outer effect? I want to make the outer effect look like the background, the blue background. And to do that, I'm going to click on this color wheel, choose the color picker, click here on the background, and then click back here, and I'm going to choose more, and I'll make that a little bit lighter. Let's make it about like that. Add to custom colors, click OK, and that'll give kind of a nice effect like that. So that I think is a kind of an interesting thing. It sort of looks like shallow water around Australia. Let's tinker some more with this, and let's put an outer border on there. And for the outer border, instead of using a black line, what I want to do is I want to use a line that's colored by this outer color, but even lighter. So I'm going to click more, and I'm going to make that even lighter, like that. And let's make that 510 kind of dash dot. and let's make it a 0.5 line. So I click OK, and what do I get? I get this very subtle effect with this kind of like a dotted dash line that you can barely see. The videos, by the way, when they're played on YouTube, are compressed videos. You're probably looking at some sort of JPEG MP4 compression, so you might not be able to see that fine line. Let's make it a little bit thicker so you can see it better. Let's make it a full 1. And so that way you can see the dotted line on the outside, what we have here. Now, so far, everything that we've been doing, we've been using kind of like the standard set of patterns that are available. What we could do is, let's go here, and in the symbol, let's turn off the inner border. What we could be doing, if we like, is we could be thematically formatting the symbology for each individual province, and we could be using things like bitmaps. So here I'm going to click on the field name, and let's say for Western Australia, let's use some kind of pattern. Let's use an image pattern. To do that, I click here on the collections picker, and I choose image. And since we don't have any images loaded, it's going to automatically open it up to whatever is the last folder that I use. Let's use some of these patterns here that we have available to us. Oops, I got a control click to select more than one. And let's try this one here. That looks kind of cool. Everybody likes peanuts. Let's use the peanuts. And maybe this one as well. Click import, and that brings in all these things. If we want to get additional images from a different folder, we can always right click on this pane and click add. And then here we'll go to the let's go to the textures, and we'll go to metal, and let's choose this one and that one. Click import, and how about some stone textures too? So click add, and in the textures folder, I'm going to go here to stone, and let's get this. There's a marble texture. It looks pretty cool. And here's another marble, and there's another marble. We'll use all those. If we can't remember what these are, we can always hover the mouse over them, and it'll tell us what each one is. For this particular, for Western Australia, I think I will use this texture right here, the deco texture. Click OK. And now let's click Update Style, and there it is. What we really need to do, though, is we really need to make this texture a little bit bigger. Let's make this one, say, like 12 points. Now I need even bigger than that. Make 28 points. Nah, even bigger. Let's make it 48 points. There, that shows the texture there. Let's change the texture for Queensland. So for Queensland, we double-click on this guy here. Here we choose images, and it remembers the images that we've already loaded. So let's use this metal one right there. Click OK. Click Update Style. And there's that metal image right there. Onward. What should we do? Well, let's see what the inner effect looks like on this. So we can put an inner effect on these as well. So for example, here on this one, we can put an inner. Now let's use this one for the metal one. Double click on that. Choose more. And for the inner effect, we'll also choose an image. And since we haven't loaded anything for the inner effect, we can choose it from any one of these collections that we have. And I'm going to choose this rivets one for the metal, from the metal collection. Click on that. Click OK. And that will, when we update style, we'll add that one right there. What I want to do is, for this one, I want to make that a little bit bigger border. So the inner-outer offset, let's make that a total of 15. Update style, and let's maybe adjust the size of that rivet effect too. So I'm going to go back here to inner. Instead of being 100%, let's make it a little bit smaller. Let's make it only 50% of whatever the main size is. There, and that gives it a better rivet effect. So that shows you how you can use both a bitmap for a particular area, and you can also use a bitmap for the inner, and for that matter, we can use a bitmap for the outer effect too. Let's go to All Australia. Click More. I'm going to make the sizing here bigger, so the effect is more visible. And for outer, I will choose a water image. Where's water? Here's water. And we'll choose this one right there. And I think we need to make that one about 500% for it to look good, if I recall correctly. There. So what we've just done is we've put filled the bitmap image into the outer effect. Now you're probably not actually going to create a map of Australia, which is this busy looking. Even that is pretty busy looking. But you get the idea how you can combine all these different effects for absolutely wild and fantastic cool effects. You can use the outer effect on this with combine vector and raster effects. So for example, here in the outer line, let's make the outer line no, let's make the outer border, excuse me. We're going to make the outer border 8 points thick. You can see how that in the preview showing it like that. And we'll make it a dash of 1 with the space between dashes of 3. So that gives that kind of effect. Let's make it even bigger. Let's make it 10. And that gives that kind of effect right there to give a kind of a spiky effect to the outer border. Anyway, as you can see, as you can imagine from all this, you can have just absolutely fantastic combinations of pretty much any darn style that you want. You know, it's very easy to change these things. You can manipulate them to your heart's content. You can change border colors and area colors and thicknesses and use bitmap patterns and all the rest. Enjoy it. It's very easy to spend a lot of time tinkering because it's so much fun to click this stuff. My only advice is to try to keep it simple. Less is more, as they say with graphics design sometimes. So enjoy. Thanks for watching, and goodbye from Manifold Land. Well, that was fun. If you want to see more, visit us at www.manifold.net. As always, Manifold delivers the world's most advanced, highest quality spatial products for GIS and DBMS at a low price that you can afford. Once again, that's manifold.net. See you soon.